quick introduction. My name is Mark.
Whatever your bread and butter is, however you shine to the street is 100% aggressively frictionless.
Is not an outcome for your client. It is basically an outcome for yourself.
It is building and chasing Robo.
Yeah.
It was obvious then that Robo was a solution in search of a problem. I will get myself into trouble here. What I think was happening in the US is that it was ego-driven by executives. He said, damn it, Julia, I just want my Robo. The advisor who let me in the room, I thought he was going to kill me because he's like, oh my God, you made my client cry.
Yeah. Talk about the inertia.
First of all, the way that it happens is slowly and all at once. People with digital transformations try to hide. It really becomes like that little white lie that then spirals out of control. I know of one transformation that literally was $1 billion write-off. The leader of the project checks out.
Yep.
And they think, oh, it's going to get done because I'm a big executive. Absolutely no way.
Hi, welcome back to season 3 of Vantage Point by DigiJanice. It has been a long journey, guys. You have supported us really well. We are a 40,000 plus community now at the time of recording, and I can't thank you guys enough. I still remember I started it and I did not know even if 100 people would want to listen to it. But, seeing our social media following extend up to 40,000 is great. So thank you so much. In this season, we are doing things a little differently. What we are also doing is we have changed the formats. So we are going to do this in segments. Our community is getting involved. We have, you wait for some of our community members to show up on, this episode. And then we are doing some new segments that we have added based on the feedback that we have received from the community. So there is a lot going on. We are really excited about bringing this. And we have a spin-off from Vantage Point, which we will talk about a little later. I will not tell you about it today. So today I am really happy that our season 3 is being kicked off by who I call Taylor Swift of financial industry. And why I call her that, I will tell you, but you know what? Let me introduce you, Julia, and Julia will tell you about herself and the great things that she has done, and then we'll get into the interview. Julia, welcome to season 3 of Vantage Point.
Thank you. It's so incredible to be here in person, right? I mean, we've been talking about this for a few years.
Yes, absolutely. And I will tell you guys, how I managed to convince Julia. That is a story in itself, but I will tell you that later. So, Julia, our audience wants to hear you. Please introduce yourself. Where are you now? About your journey and, some great outcomes that you have delivered over a few years.
Sure. So really proud to be sitting here after 18 years in the wealth management business, 23 years in financial services. Upon reflection, having sat among some of the largest and most interesting conversions of our time in the wealth management space, I was privileged to be the chief digital officer for Wells Fargo's private bank for almost 15 years.
Yep.
And now I am the global head of experiences and platform for Citibank. At Wells, the things that are really notable, I was part of a team that built the first omni-channel home equity application front to back in 2001. So that was way before omni-channel was even a buzzword, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it. And from there, went on to help build Wells Fargo's private bank from the ground up, from a CX perspective across all channels. Then was the first to put trust accounts online. Also managed the largest conversion of investment management accounts, so really complex specialty assets. In U.S. banking history during the Wachovia merger, did one of the industry's largest specialty wealth conversions separate to that fairly recently. And then also really kind of unbelievably led the team that launched the first mobile app for financial advisors to use while they were doing business with clients on the road. So nobody's kind of more surprised than me how it's ended up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now you know why I call her Taylor Swift of financial services. And there is a lot to unpack there. What we'll do is, guys, we are going to split up this whole episode into 4 different parts. We'll do Julia has been very, very vocal about her stand on Robos. So we'll start with that. Then, we'll talk about the digital transformation project she has run. And then, Julia, from there, we'll go a little bit deeper into the digital transformation. Then we go into the Gen Z. And then we have a new segment called Crystal Ball. So we'll take you there. So guys, very, very packed episode today. So Julia, let's do the segment 1 first. Okay. And I don't know if you've seen our episode before. We start with the hard questions. So I have seen you are very, very vocal about robos not being effective, in the financial services space, right? And I can tell you there are so many robos in Singapore and a lot of them have been here. So they will be listening to you. So all the guys, who have been here. Now, the first question is, how do you define a robo advisor here?
Yeah. So my definition of a robo is really where there is an algorithm managing your portfolio and you are mostly expected to just be kind of passive to that algorithm and you don't really have an advisor relationship.
Yes.
So it's kind of the Wealthfront and Betterments of the world. And that's how I define robo.
Okay. So you are basically talking about where somebody comes in, somebody manages your money. They select a collection of funds or ETFs, but we are not talking about the DIY platforms where you go and buy your own stock, etc.
Correct. So not self-service brokerage. That's what I...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are talking about, guys, we are talking about these platforms where you go in, somebody has created like portfolios, they have like maybe 30, 40 funds or ETFs behind that, and based on your risk profile, they give you a portfolio, or based on the themes you want, they give you a portfolio.
Yep, it's managed by algorithms,
Why do you think they will not work?
Yeah, so look, I mean, my stance on this is very well known, as you said, and I think it's important to go back to 2008 and 10 and understand my position on that in context of the times.
Yeah.
And that is something I think people forget about. So let's take a step back and go into a little time machine. If you think about in 2008, all regular products like checking, savings, mortgage, home equity had already been digitized. So your core banking products were already online and customers were using them at scale, right? Then you had your brokerage, your traditional E-Trade, self-directed brokerage capabilities were doing very well at that time too. And they were already automated. But what wasn't happening at that time is wealth management in the traditional sense of it was not digitized at all.
Right.
So what happened at that time is that a whole host of senior executives were chasing and trying to define what was going to be next, right, for wealth management as an industry online. And my recollection is that there were two factions. There was a whole contingent of executives who believed people wanted to do business over an old oak desk forever and ever. And then you had this contingent of executives that really, in my opinion, had this shiny toy and thought that the future of wealth management was robo. And what was happening, at least in the US, and I don't know the Asian market like I should. I need to learn it now. So that's why your podcast is going to be super important to me.
Thank you for saying that.
And congratulations on your success. It's so fantastic.
Thank you.
But so in the US, what was happening is that a whole host of very senior executives who are controlling the funding, which is a limited amount of funding at each firm, they were all building and chasing robo, which meant that they were diverting funding from the traditional channels that clients were doing business in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So what happened is I felt strongly, based on my conversations with our clients, that robo was the wrong bet.
Okay.
And so I raised, I don't even remember how much, maybe $100,000 to do research. And we did 3-pronged research.
Okay.
It was with clients and their heirs, next gen, with prospects. And so that was one category. The other category was with our competitors. And the third was with advisors.
Right.
Okay. So we spent 9 months talking to all of those constituents
Right.
and putting it in a stew, mixing it all up. And what we were trying to do is figure out where did we need to make a bet that was not Robo and that would move the needle for our clients in a digitized way, right? So we did that. And it was very obvious that clients were not seeking a Robo, right? In my opinion, it was obvious then that Robo was a solution in search of a problem.
Yeah.
And that is the worst mistake you can make in product management. And what our clients told us absolutely is that they expected frictionless experiences and they expected for digital to bring them closer to their advisor in ways that were meaningful and added value and were entirely about convenience.
Yeah. So basically you're saying you went out there, you looked at your prospects, etc., and you asked them, and they want a frictionless experience that takes them closer to their advisor.
Yep.
And just to drill a little deeper in it, because this is very interesting, and I'll tell you why, because we did something while I was back at a different firm, and that said the same thing.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And so now, what segment are you talking about? Mass affluent, ultra HNI, etc.
Yeah, that's important, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. So it definitely is I was definitely squarely kind of in the high net worth and ultra high net worth space, and I have been from most of my career. So the audience can kind of take what I'm saying with that lens. I think it's really important.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never really done mass affluent or really emerging affluent.
Yeah.
But I think the same rules of convenience and trust and connection still apply.
Yeah. And see, I'll tell you, I've interviewed a few Robo advisors and their CEOs, the CEOs of Robo advisors in this very studio, etc. And I always ask them, why would somebody want a platform like yours? A bank can offer it and etc. And there are great answers. Sometimes the answer is like, we are more transparent, etc. and stuff. But the underlying trend for a client is when you look at, let's say, retail and mass affluent, that is a very different segment. When you look at HNI, ultra HNI, they want to be closer to their advisor. Because most of them would say feedback like, I can never find my advisor at the right point of time, So when I was building Symphony's, communication over WhatsApp for advisors, that was one feedback that, we spoke to a few HNI people and we got is, they're like, I can never find my advisor at the right time. I'm like, how can that be? Like somebody who's like only catering to 20, 30, 40 clients, how can that be? And it was not that, but the challenge was the platforms for engagement were really hard. So it was not the advisor, but the enabling platform. So absolutely get where you're coming from. But she believes there are better way of spending money and digitally transforming the industry when it comes to HNI, ultra HNI segment. And we've seen that, Julia, you're not alone on this. UBS dropped out of the Wealthfront deal. JP Morgan also, like they sold their advisory platform, the Robo platform, sorry. I forgot the name. Guys, I'm getting old, so don't mind that. Right?
You have a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
You're
so
allowed.
That doesn't really say I am young, right? So, but now there are other platforms as well. Let's look at the ones who are doing this well. There is Betterment, Wealthfront. Schwab is doing it well. I think there was a couple of other ones. So there are few who are doing it well. What are they doing differently?
Well, look, okay. So first of all, I think that what we're seeing with the success of like Wealthfront in particular, it's that they got to the market early and they captured the good deal of the market share up there, and that was that. What you're seeing with Schwab and Vanguard is a hybrid model. And remember, Vanguard has a retirement feeder at scale. So I think the firms that have good feeders are the ones that you'll see do well. And they're also, again, pinning it to you get some level of actual advisor time. So I think it proves this idea that if the market's crashing, calling an algorithm is not what people were looking for, right?
Absolutely not. And so let me take you back like on the first question. Now you said there were two factions. One believed that Robo is going to do everything. And the other believed like, where you were a part of, where you went out, researched, and you said better advisor accessibility and frictionless experience. why do you think the other side believe the Robo will change the world
Yeah.
for Ultra HNI? Like,
Yeah.
if you could see any positive points from there, why would you think that they believed in this? Or was the play to go from Ultra HNI into HNI and, like say next gen will only use platforms, etc. and stuff? What was the play there? I'm like still curious on hearing that
Well,
out.
listen, I will get myself into trouble here if you wanted some. What I think was happening in the US is that it was ego driven by executives. So what happened is it became viral. And I don't think that people really understand the degree to which the business is very small,
Yeah.
right? And so it became a buzzword among executives. And I remember being at a conference having a debate with a CEO that was pursuing Robo, and he was really getting frustrated at my pushing back on the fact that I thought it was the wrong bet.
Yeah.
In a land where there's limited funding, right?
Yeah.
When there's unlimited funding, you just do whatever you want. But
Right.
when there's limited funding, he was getting really upset. And at one point, he said, I don't want to swear, but he said, "Damn it, Julia, I just want my Robo."
Yeah.
And it was clear that he was competing against one of his peers in his head.
Yeah.
So look, I want to use that as an opportunity to say that I have strong belief that so much of why digital transformation fails and why we've made the wrong bets is because we've let our ego get in the way instead of listening to our clients.
Absolutely.
And I think if you listen to your clients, they're going to tell you exactly what you need to know and what you need to do. And people, push back on that and say your client wouldn't necessarily know what feature they wanted.
Right.
And I agree with that. But let me tell you what I was really proud of from the research that we did. We ended up writing a white paper called The Future of Advice. And it was all about connecting advisors with their with digital. And one of the prototypes that we built, now remember, this is 2010. This is 10 years before COVID.
Yeah.
What we did was we built a prototype for a multi-channel make an appointment feature that could allow families, right, very complex families with lots of generations, make an appointment for a portfolio review in multiple channels. So somebody could pick to dial in by video. One could pick to go into the office. One could do it from home over the phone. Okay.
Yeah.
They could do that in one click, and then they could have the meeting together. And they could, I love to tell this story. People are so sick of this story, but I'm not sick of it.
No, please tell me.
Okay.
We want
It's
to
a
hear
great
this.
story. I went to show the prototype in Beverly Hills to a very wealthy family. And the advisor was like, "Julia, the patriarch is 70 years old. He doesn't care about digital. His son was 40. And he said he doesn't care." And I said, please bear with me. So we showed this prototype, which allowed for this multifamily portfolio review.
Right.
And the dad started to cry.
Really?
The dad started to weep.
Oh, wow.
And it was very uncomfortable, and everybody in the room got quiet. And the advisor who let me in the room, I thought he was going to kill me because he's like, "Oh my God, you made my client cry."
Yeah.
And the son said, "Dad, why are you crying?" And the father said, "This would be the first time that all of my children would be able to attend a portfolio review and understand my legacy."
Right.
And he had just been diagnosed with cancer.
Oh,
so
my
if you
goodness.
think about it, his daughter was in San Francisco. His other child was someplace else. So only the oldest brother was ever able to walk in person
Yeah.
to go do the portfolio review. And by the way, scheduling that was back and forth over the phone back then, right? You could never coordinate 15 people's calendars over the phone.
Yeah.
But this way, you got to log in. Everybody in the family could log into their secure session,
Right.
pick a time that worked for them. They could coordinate that and then attend from anywhere.
Right.
Think about the power of that. You're meeting people where they are.
Yeah. And financial industry professionals are the biggest part of our audience. We build this show for them, you know.
Okay.
So if you are out there, that answer was amazing. See, giving out finding something that will work, going and doing the research, taking it in ways that, the other person would understand, like what you did, getting the regulatory angle in. I can tell you that works really well, you need to get something that works really well. I'm sure I'm also going to get in a little trouble when my firm hears this out, but yeah, obviously that helps. And and you're always competing for priorities, etc.
Totally.
And so now what we'll do is, this was a great answer. And I'm sure everybody's now very keen to understand how you run digital transformations. How do you get there? What are the challenges? What are the key concepts, etc. and stuff. And I must tell you, the last time somebody talked about digital transformation on on our episode, it was Dr. Dennis, who built UOB's Tomorrow.
I listened.
You listened?
Yes.
Okay. One of his clips has 26,000 views, which is 2x the next clip.
Okay.
So
no pressure. I'm going to beat him. I'm going to beat him.
Yes, exactly. So now your challenge is to get that, to beat him on that. But, and the reason things resonated with was he was very real about things. He talked about it. So we'll get into that in the next segment, which is like digital transformation, the projects you are done, etc. And we'll dive really deep into it. Okay. So now, we are coming back to, the section 2 where we talk to you about digital transformation. Julia, honestly, you have led some of the most amazing projects I've come across. I've been in the industry for like 5-6 years now, and I've seen some, I will not say a lot of projects, but you have done some of the most amazing projects. But we are not going to make this easy for you, because we want to talk to you about your success and your failures as well. Yeah. Because I think when somebody like you comes here, the idea is for us is to get a thought leader like you and your thoughts to a very wide audience. And the audience should also realize that, success and failure are part of what you all do, right? So we don't want to make this like a platform of win, 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 but we want to really get a real message out there. So first of all, and this is something that I am very curious about, you have led some really large projects, How did you become that go-to person that everybody is like, you're a global head in Citi, right? For platform and experiences. And you have done a $75 million project for Wells Fargo just before this, right?
Yep.
How did you become this person that everybody trusts with so many dollars and, from a skill, branding, personality, pitch, everything? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So first of all, the way that it happens is slowly and all at once.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, what happened for me in my case, I got an incredible sponsor early in my career who put me in the game. So let's be clear about how important that is, and how if you don't have that, it's difficult to accomplish things at a large company.
Yeah.
But for me, it was every project that I committed to, starting from the day I walked in a bank at the age of 29, I finished it. So I very methodically did what I said. And every time I was picking up skills on how to do the next one that would then be bigger. So the first way to do it is to be credible. And to be credible, I think you need a couple of things. You have to, first of all, be willing to ask for help.
Yep.
Right? You have to be able to say what you don't know.
Yeah.
And in my case, I intuitively and instinctively involved others as I was going along. So I started out as an individual contributor. Then I inherited a team. Then that team got bigger. So, and as I was doing that, I was being more inclusive. I was never trying to be the person who knew everything.
Yeah.
And I was willing to ask for help. And then the other thing is, I believe in ruthless transparency. So a lot of people with digital transformations try to hide when something's going wrong because they think they can fix it.
Yep.
And it really becomes like that little white lie that then spirals out of control. It's like My Husband Loves Frasier, where everything goes wrong with Frasier episodes is because he tells a lie. And then he has to double down on the lie. And then it just goes, downhill from there. So I am always ruthlessly transparent and am willing to ask for help. And so if I could take a step back, what I would say is that digital transformation is entirely about people and leadership. And that gets lost, right? I think people really forget that these transformations aren't just for people.
Yeah.
They get done by people.
Yes. And one of Julia's skill is also how to read the mind, because that was my next question to Julia, but we will still go ahead and ask that. But, before we go down that path, Julia, you said something really good, and that is something very important. Finding a sponsor in the organization who puts you in front, because I have personally seen the difference, in the organizations that I worked. They were not very large. They were some mid-size, some large. If you have a sponsor who's putting you up, that is an amazing place to be. And if you are in a place where you're constantly trying to prove yourself, trying to live up to the bar, that is a very stressful, very demotivating place to be as well. So whether it is a large or a small organization, I think that sponsor part is really, really good. If you had to give one advice to our audience, who is like, let's say, mid financial industry professionals, and they're just starting to build out their credibility, etc. What are the one or two things they should do today to be in your position, in your chair in, let's say, 10 years or 20 years?
So the most important thing is to care about people. And what I think when I look back on my career, you won't find people that want to say bad things about me behind my back. And I think a lot of people in our industry show up with these huge egos where it's all about them. And the more power they get, the more it becomes about them. And it is exhausting. It is not motivating. And I really believe that the only reason I'm still sitting here and able to still do this work at scale is because I never made it about myself. And I really try hard to make it about the team and to be grateful and motivating. But that doesn't mean being soft. Because nobody says that I'm soft, right? I can be very, very demanding. But we can talk about that later. But for the most important thing that I mentor a lot of people. The most important thing I tell people is do what you say. And whatever it is that you're saying you're going to do, get it done. And if you aren't going to get it done, message that early and ask for help. And a lot of people just don't do that.
And that is amazing that, just get things done. You're going to stand out from a very large group of people who will say things and they will not do. So, great advice. And the point that you made, you care about people, but you are hard on people, reminds me of that, documentary about Michael Jordan, where somebody asked, do you think Michael Jordan is a good guy or, this? And I don't remember the answer, but, it was quoted so many times. But the person said, I don't know about that. But what I do know is he helped me get the best out of me. And some of the best people, you look at Steve Jobs, etc. and stuff, they got the best out of people by being very hard, very demanding, etc. You might not be like their best pals, but and that is a really great advice. Now let's get a little deeper into, because what we are hearing is digital transformation is challenging, right? Why is digital transformation so challenging in banks? Like, it is challenging everywhere, but the success ratio in banks is like what? 10 to 30%?
10 to 30%.
And I'm being very generous.
You are being generous.
10, yes, exactly. So, and I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm speaking from the studies we have read out there. Why is it so difficult?
No, and look, I mean, I know of one transformation that I wasn't involved in, thank God, that literally was $1 billion write-off at one firm, $1 billion conservatively, right? So a lot to unpack in terms of what is the difference between success and failure. The absolute number one thing, I believe, so we can talk about the leadership more. I think we'll talk about that in different contexts, hopefully still. But the number one thing is you have to plan. I don't think enough people put enough into the upfront planning. And then absolutely getting the right personalities on the board early. So, and I think I have managed to be successful at that because I do read people very well. And that's kind of something I've done since I was a little girl. Right. So, the the first thing you have to do is get the right players on the board, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself in the planning phase.
Right.
Most people underestimate the planning phase. They don't understand how important it is to get the right players on the board at each stage of the project. So planning, then execution, then post-implementation. Because all three of those steps are critical to getting adoption, understanding the very end, which I think most banks don't do well. I don't think they do change management well.
Yeah.
And then the execution, right, where you're potentially uncovering bad data at any time at any of these banks, which could go wrong. And we can talk about that in length. And then the planning. Okay, so you got to get the right players on the board. And somebody who might be good at execution might be the person who you think can do the planning, but actually they're terrible at it and they damn the project. So understanding people's skill sets and understanding what they're good at, I think, has made all the difference in the world. But in order to put the right players on the board, you have to really know the players, which means you have to have relationships with them, which goes back again to why it is a people game.
Yes.
Right? So, so you've got to do the planning. Then you have to, in the execution phase, the next thing that goes wrong is the leader, usually the leader of the project or the transformation, or call it what you will, checks out. And they think, oh, it's going to get done because I'm a big executive and I'm saying it's going to get done. Absolutely no way. You have to be a leader who is close enough to the details, not to micromanage, but to know when something's going pear-shaped.
Yep.
Really important.
Oh, I can tell you like a great example of that, I am not going to take the name of the company or the client here because it is going to ruffle a lot of feathers. So I was working in a firm back then, like a few years ago, and there were two divisions in this very large global banks. So one was our client already, and then there was another one which wanted to be our client. So they wanted to lean on this contract that we had already, right? They kept fighting amongst themselves to the extent it was raised to the CEO of the bank. I am not kidding. It was raised to the CEO of the bank. The firm that I used to work for had a great relationship with the CEO. They talked. He gave a diktat to both the sides. You will work together on this.
Yep.
I was so happy that day that I was like, this is like the CEO of a listed bank, global listed bank. He told these guys this has to happen. This is happening. I started counting the dollars in my bonus check because if this deal went through, obviously I was running the deal, I would get paid. And my happiness was very short-lived. The deal never happened because at least before we did this whole, reach out to the global CEO and stuff, things were still moving. Once we did that, the person gave a diktat. The teams found ways not to do the project.
Yep.
And that diktat did not help. It went the other way. And then I realized one thing, and this is a very important lesson that I learned very hard way, is that a CEO in a bank can say something, but the teams which are executing may or may not do it.
Yep.
And it doesn't really matter. They will find their ways to, block you.
Yes. 100%.
But that is a very interesting point that you made. Like execs are in this position and they're like, oh, I'm in this position. I'm saying it should be done. It doesn't happen that way.
No.
And that brings us to the point, and you've talked about it a bit in our conversations. How important is the role of leadership, and how should leaders like you, and you work for some really senior people at Citi, how do you come in and position yourself, or how do you behave so that the teams below you are willing to go to battle for you?
Yeah.
So that.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the question, right? Because you do need them to go to battle for you.
Yeah.
And these projects literally are so complicated at any given time. I'm running T+1 for our firm.
Oh, wow.
That's huge. And it's massive, and it touches every system in the company. So, and the whole industry is going to T+1.
Yeah.
So imagine us all marching to this drum. So look, first of all, I have been super, super fortunate to work for some giants, right, in the industry. And early in my career, I got to hang around a little bit with Dick Kovacevich and, be exposed to him when I was younger in my career. And Dick was a monster about execution.
Okay.
So
thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dick Kovacevich was a monster about execution. Like I would have shined the man's shoes, I swear. He was so charismatic, but he was entirely about execution. And a lot of executives love to portray this idea of strategy being all that's important.
Yes.
And Dick was like, anybody can write a PowerPoint deck.
Yes.
Only the 1% can execute against it.
Exactly. I agree 100%.
Right?
Yep.
So being around someone like Dick who saw people, do you know what I mean? Like you would meet somebody like that. I mean, a lot of people don't know Dick because he wasn't a big peacock in the industry. He was a giant, right? He was behind Norwest, Wachovia, Wells Fargo mergers. He was the executive for the largest banking mergers in U.S. banking history.
Right.
Okay. And he cared about the details, not in a micromanaging way. Now I am fortunate to work under the leadership of Andy Sieg, who came from Merrill Lynch. The transformational way that he shows up to a place, sees people, acknowledges them, makes them feel understood, is very clear about his direction and expectations for where we're going. It inspires people
it does.
to do their best work. It really does. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, right? Because trust me, people know that I'm not an easy person when something's not going well. You got to be tough.
Yeah, and you don't need to be easy. Like if something is not going right, why will you be easy? You have to deliver the outcome, right?
Right.
You talked about Dick and Andy, the amount of social media activity I've seen in Singapore this week, like everybody in Citi is celebrating being around him. Says a lot about him, right? What do you think these guys did differently than some of the other execs? Yeah.
Look, 100%, they don't make it about them. And that's so hugely different. When I look at the executives that have failed, and I might get in trouble for this, but obviously I worked at Wells Fargo. So Carrie Tolstedt failed very visibly, right? Yes. 100% it was about her all the time. Do you know what I mean? So when leaders are showing up that way, you can kind of predict an outcome. Leaders that care about people and make it about people are successful at transforming firms, right? I mean, you look at the way that Dick took Norwest all the way to post Wachovia Wells Fargo merger. Like that was incredible.
Right.
And the sales scandal that happened actually did not happen on his watch. And what happened there happened very quickly. So it takes a long time to be successful. And it is very easy for it to all fall apart.
Yep.
Which is where, when we start talking about failure, I mean, you can see where there's times you can't recover.
Yes.
But the difference is leaders who make it about other people, but also make it clear that they expect you to be ethical, transparent, and accountable are the ones that are going to get transformation done, full stop.
Oh, that is an amazing answer. And, this conversation is such a multidimensional conversation because, people come in there like digital transformation, technology, clients, etc. And some of it is known. Like a lot of it is not this. And this is the real discussion that what happens is so many digital transformations are driven on ego.
Yes, 100%.
I have spent $10 million. This was my direction. It is not going well. You have not done it well. Let's spend another 10 million and then another 10 million.
Yes.
And then 5 years later, I'm in a different bank, claiming all the transformational things, etc. I am telling you stories from what I've heard. I have not worked in a bank. So I've looked at it from outside, but I have not worked. So I'm telling you stories that I've heard off and on record while doing this. So now, Julia, great answers, by the way, all of them. So with season 3, we are introducing a new segment.
Okay.
So as you know, our community has grown really large and we always call it a community. And a lot of people have asked me, some nicely, some very not very nicely. And they're like, this is a chat show. I'm like, this is a community. They're like, it is not a community. I'm like, no, not yet, but this will be a community. And the first step towards this is like, what we did is when we told a few members of our community that you will be here, they wanted to ask you a few questions. So we are going to start that. So guys, please don't mind me looking at the phone and, getting this started. So the first question is coming from Mark Lowe, really, really good guy. I met him as well. So Mark, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Julia. Hi, Lux. Thanks for taking my question. Quick introduction. My name is Mark. I'm working as a project manager in a Singaporean brokerage firm. My question to Julia is this. While we're all aware that financial institutions have been digitizing many of their processes, in your perspective, which specific areas within the banking industry still offer the greatest scope for improvement or still experience significant amounts of friction, be that internal processes or through customer interactions?
Well, first of all, hi, Mark.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. So, look, I think that if we were being honest with ourselves, we would have to admit that there is a ton of friction still existing in actual wealth management, investment products, structured notes, those complex assets are full of friction.
Yeah, they are.
Right? And the industry has not figured out yet how to transform them in a way that is inexpensive and fast.
Yeah.
And it shows, right, in terms of your client experience. So ask anyone who has to execute against their stock grant if they work at a company that gives out stock grants, your RSUs. It is an absolute hellscape every single year. I have to do that.
Yeah.
The systems are old, they're outdated, they're not intuitive, there's lag times, it's not instant. You have to move money from here to there and then transfer it from there to here. I mean, it's the same as the fact that like 401k rollovers.
Yeah.
A few firms have done them very, very well. Obviously, Fidelity, I think Vanguard's made a lot of strides. But there is so much pain in those processes. And so I think it's easy for people to have magical belief that we're largely done.
Yeah.
And it's not true. Like at the ultra high net worth level where somebody has really complex holdings on multiple different platforms with multiple different accounts, depending on whether or not you have a single client identifier that can help wrap it all together. All of those things do not exist everywhere on the street. And so I think that, I think I might have been thinking I would touch on this another place, but I have really strong belief that whatever your bread and butter is, however you shine to the street, you better be making sure that that is 100% aggressively frictionless.
Yep.
Right? And I think at a big company where it's easy for a project to stop and start and stop and start, you end up finding that it isn't straight through end to end. It isn't immediate. It isn't real time. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I really think that that's where our business, at least on the high net worth and ultra high net worth space, really needs to lean in.
It is insightful. And, I work with execs across APAC, and a lot of discussions are now around a great user experience cannot exist without the middle office and back office being transformed.
Correct.
Yeah. And
100%.
I think you really nailed that while a lot of transformation on the front end might have been done, but middle and back office is where, the processes need to keep up. You need to engage with regulators to make sure that, regulation is keeping up. Obviously, that is a, collaborative approach in most countries. And then you also need to, get in there and figure out how do you do these things better, frictionless, more real time, and more, without stopping on these various steps. So great answer.
And by the way, let me just, because I love that part. Like I haven't even mentioned, I can't believe that you have to do this end to end. And I think when I reflect on my career, we were doing it end to end from the very beginning.
Right.
But we didn't know that we were making the right bet at the time. Do you know what I mean? Like in a way, maybe it was just on accident, but the first home equity omni-channel application that I built was connected to our mainframe. And we had our ops partners involved, and we put in an instant decision calculation in between. And it was front to back in 2001.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
That is amazing. And it also, when you were previously talking about that, what I realized is, and this is my observation, you can tell me if it is right or wrong. The reason you delivered it end to end is because you were looking for an outcome for your client. Because, having a shiny interface is not an outcome for your client. It is basically an outcome for yourself.
It is.
But having an interface where your client can go and, do these joint sessions together with their family, etc. and stuff is an outcome for your client. And when you're looking for outcomes for your clients, you will end up transforming not only the front end, but back and middle and everything. So, and that, I think that when I heard that answer, from you before and we had this conversation, I was like, oh, she was delivering these outcomes. So that I think might have been the big difference. But obviously, you would have different thoughts. We have another question which touches on these topics and, which is coming from the community. Now, this question